A very warm welcome to the first TEDxESCP London event. My name is Terence T and I'm a professor at ESCP Business School. It is my honor and pleasure to make this introduction to this highly anticipated event. The topic is transformative change. Now, when I first heard of this topic, my knee-jerk reaction was technology-induced change. You can't really blame me for such immediate response because we all have been somehow programmed to think changes frequently, probably solely, come from using technologies. But then I realized that transformative change is much more, and indeed far more important than just technologies. After all, let's not forget, technologies are just tools, and tools that can be used for both the purpose of good and bad. And in today's world, there is unfortunately no shortage of injustice and inequalities, with many social issues that were bad before the pandemic got even worse after. We must therefore do something to make this world, a much better place for all of us, as well as for our next generations. And that's why I congratulate our students for organizing a TED Talk around the topic of transformative change. It is a type of change that both you and I can start. This is a form of change that can be created everywhere. As you will hear from our experts, transformative change often originates from nothing more than a brave idea, with the help of a lot of ambition to turn it into reality. It can start small, sometimes down to individual decisions, but go on to challenge the long-established status quo. The ideas behind the transformative change all have potential to build a new and better social norms and create a better environment for not just the few, but the many. With this in mind, the TED Talks you're about to see cover a variety of subjects, from the environment to business, from healthcare and generational changes, all the way to personal changes. And they're all speakers with passion and ideas that I'm sure will inspire us all. You will hear a former stock market millionaire and ecstasy supplier turn into a public figure on how drug users and sexual abuse survivors transformed his view. You will find out if animals can teach you about leadership and if animals are better managers. You will also see why winning in business isn't just about coming first. Now, technologies are, of course, opening up new transformative possibilities. We can now use quantum computing as a way out of our climate emergency and AI for the purpose of improving healthcare. As I mentioned earlier, transformative change can come from us as individuals. This is perhaps even more relevant now that we are spending more time out of the office working as individuals. We will see what future impact Generation Z will create. We will hear how women in healthcare can make a mark using technologies. We will find new ideas in transforming ourselves personally, making us stronger and more resilient. In some of the areas the speakers touch on are changes that are long overdue. In others, you'll be fascinated by how much change has been made. Every speaker has a great and unique story to tell. I'm sure you will enjoy every single one of the talks curated for you at TEDxESCP London. Let's now let our experts and leaders inspire us to drive transformative change.
Our first speaker today, Vince Madai, is a senior healthcare AI researcher at Charité in Berlin. His research focuses on the translation of artificial intelligence, predominantly in the areas of healthcare and neuroscience. The future of healthcare is shaping up in front of our eyes with advanced technologies such as AI, robotics, or nanotechnology. Therefore, we are delighted to welcome Vince, who speaks about transforming healthcare with AI. A revolution or an evolution? Let's find out.
Have you ever wondered how it would be to be treated by an artificial intelligence instead of a human doctor? And how would you not, when artificial intelligence has led to all of these breakthroughs in so many different areas in the recent years, completely changing them, transforming them, doing only things that humans could do before? AI beat the best human players at games like chess and Go. AI can drive cars, and AI can write poems. Admittedly, not very good ones, but they are still better than the poems I can write. But what about healthcare? It has been predicted that the adaptation of artificial intelligence in healthcare could save 400,000 lives, could save 200 billion euros, and could save up to 1.8 billion hours annually in the European Union alone. So you must understand my enthusiasm when I, a medical doctor and scientist, learned for the first time about AI. I wanted to be part of this revolution when AI would change, transform healthcare overnight. So I began learning the tool of the trade, coding, and I began studying AI. And that was when I discovered the two dirty secrets of artificial intelligence. Secrets I'm going to share with you today. The first dirty secret of artificial intelligence is that artificial intelligence is not intelligent at all. We do not have today something called artificial general intelligence that could be considered intelligent according to human standards. Today's AI works only well in very narrow and predefined tasks. The AI that can beat the best human players at chess can literally do nothing else. The term AI, how it is used today, is simply a marketing term. But what is AI then? Well, in the overwhelming majority, when we refer to artificial intelligence today, we mean techniques of machine learning. That doesn't sound too bad, right? Machines that can learn. But this is the second dirty secret of artificial intelligence. Machines are really bad at learning stuff, at least compared to humans. Let me show that to you. These are two types of birds, two types of woodpeckers. They are quite similar, but they also show considerable differences. You, as human beings, having seen an example of each, could from today on distinguish these two birds with quite a low error rate. In machine learning, we would have to provide the best algorithms, thousands if not 10,000s of images, to achieve the same low error rate. So the first reason why machines are bad at learning stuff is that these algorithms are very data hungry, inefficient in the learning process. And this is a big challenge in healthcare, where we usually have very little data to work with. Of course, we have data from studies, from registries, from electronic health records, but we cannot just simply use all of this data. Due to data privacy laws, and also due to the fact that it is really hard to properly anonymize data. But this is not the only reason why machines are bad at learning stuff. A main characteristic of machine learning is that it is a data-driven method. This means we do not need to specifically program the algorithms what to learn. Instead, we provide the data, which contains the inputs, but it also contains the outputs, so what we want to predict. The learning process will come up with a so-called model, which can then do the prediction for us. Let's look at a simple example. You would like to build a system that can predict the color of images. So we would provide many samples of these images as an input, and at the same time we would provide the output, meaning the information which color the images have. The learning process would create a model that can predict the color of the images. So if you provide now a blue image, the system can correctly predict the color blue. Now this works great as long as we provide high quality data. But what would happen if, let's assume this, our data would contain too few examples of people of color, and we wanted to build a system that can predict the content of photographs? We might end up with a tool that tags people of color as gorillas, as it happened in a Google tool a few years ago. We call such a systematic deviation from what an AI tool is supposed to do bias. And the main takeaway here is that if your data contains bias, the resulting model will contain that bias as well. So the second reason why machines are really bad at learning stuff is that machine learning is data-driven. It will learn everything from the presented data exactly as it is, even if the data contains bias or other problems. And this is again a big challenge in healthcare. It is known since decades that much of the medical data is heavily biased. It is often only representative for white males, but not for women or people of color. Or it is only representative for certain ethnicities, neglecting others. In genome-wide association studies, for example, the overwhelming majority of patients are of European origin. So if we were to use this data to create AI tools, these AI tools would naturally only be representative for patients of European origin. But this is not just a theoretical consideration. Obermeyer and colleagues found considerable racial bias in a tool used commercially to guide healthcare decisions in the US. But again, this is not even the last reason why machines are bad at learning stuff. One of the most popular algorithms today are so-called artificial neural nets. They are very loosely based on how neurons in the brain work, and the learning process determines the strength of the connection between these artificial neurons, resulting in the final model. The major challenge here is that these algorithms are so-called black boxes. We cannot intuitively understand what these connections between the artificial neurons mean. And so we do not understand why these algorithms come up with the output that they provide. This is, again, in stark contrast to human beings. If you provide an opinion, I could ask why, and you can tell me your reasoning. It should be mentioned that techniques exist to open up these black boxes, but they are imperfect and they are not yet properly validated. So the third reason why machines are bad at learning stuff is that we often need to use black boxes. And this is again a huge challenge in healthcare. Imagine this situation where an AI tool is used in the clinical setting and it provides a certain recommendation to provide a certain treatment to a patient. Why should the doctor trust the output of this system without knowing how it works? If a colleague provided a second opinion, she could ask, "Why do you think we should choose this course of action?" And the colleague could provide their reasoning. A black box remains opaque. So I hope I could show you that there are several AI-specific reasons why the adaptation of artificial intelligence in healthcare will not happen very quickly. But to add insult to injury, there are not only AI-specific reasons why the adaptation of technology is generally slow in the healthcare setting. There are also healthcare-specific reasons. One reason is that healthcare is a very complex system of hospitals, practices, doctors, and services, such as emergency services. It is neither simple nor desirable, and probably impossible, to disrupt such a system, to change it completely overnight. Instead, change in healthcare is gradual. A step, one step out of many, will be augmented or replaced by technology. So radiologists diagnosing a certain disease in medical imaging would not be replaced by AI. She would be replaced by a radiologist that uses artificial intelligence. We should not forget here that a radiologist performs hundreds of highly complex tasks every day. Not only diagnosing images, she also informs patients, plans scanning procedures, and maybe even performs interventions. To completely replace a radiologist, we would need to provide hundreds of AI tools, one for each task that she performs. Another reason why the adaptation of technology, such as AI, in healthcare is slow is regulation. You cannot simply develop a tool and use it in a hospital. You have created a medical device, and it needs to be certified according to the regulatory laws of your region. These regulatory laws exist to ensure patient safety. And to develop a tool according to these requirements and to fulfill them can take many years. So I learned all of these things, and I had to completely reevaluate what I thought I knew about artificial intelligence. But what about you? Do you still wonder how it would be to be treated by an artificial intelligence instead of a human doctor? Probably not, because I hope I could show you that artificial intelligence will not transform healthcare overnight in a revolution. You will not suddenly find an artificial intelligence instead of a human doctor waiting for you. Instead, the transformation will happen step by step, certification by certification, as an evolution. Thank you.
Our next speaker is a former stock market millionaire who went down the wrong path. Shaun Attwood was incarcerated in America's deadliest prison for supplying ecstasy. He's now a podcaster, activist, and YouTuber with over 600,000 followers on the platform. During his time in prison, as well as through his true crime podcast, Shaun started questioning his worldview. But let him tell us how sex abuse survivors and heroin addicts managed to transform his worldview.
As a podcaster, I recently interviewed a woman called Maya, whose dad had bred her solely for the purpose of molesting her. This went on from age 4 for over a decade. She met a man and she escaped from that household. When she was with her husband, she got a call from Essex Police and they said, "We know everything." She said, "How do you know everything? How can you possibly know? And aren't you too late?" And the reason they had found out was because her dad and his wife were on holiday in France. A relative had gone to the house to tidy up and saw a videotape. They put the videotape in, pressed play, and it was a video of the dad sexually assaulting Maya when she was a teenager. The police waited until the dad returned from France and arrested him. And he sent a letter to Maya, which the police intercepted. In that letter it said, "Go in the back garden to the shed and destroy everything in the black box in the shed." The cops went to the house. They found the black box. They opened it, and the first cop starts reading through it, and he threw up. In that black box was a diary of every single molestation, rating them and specifying what date rape drugs he had used. The police also found a control room, a shrine in the house dedicated to what he had done to his daughter. In this control room was access to all the cameras and microphones he had put throughout this house, and hours of videotaped footage of what he had done to his daughter. At the sentencing hearing, the judge said, "You are one of the most evil people to ever step foot in my courtroom. You deserve a life sentence." But because of the sentencing laws, all he could give the predator was a maximum of 10 years, of which he had to serve 50%. He'd already done 2 unsentenced, so he's going to get out after 3 years, after completely putting his daughter through this torture of over a decade and doing things that could have potentially have destroyed her life, her ability to live like a normal person, her childhood stolen. The dad knew he was going to get out after so many years, and he sent a letter to the judge mocking the entire process. As a YouTuber and a podcaster, interviewing hundreds of true crime guests, perpetrators, victims, ex-cops, ex-prison guards, journalists, all these interviews have transformed my worldview. and helped me establish a mission. My mission is to end the war on drugs and take all of those resources and go after the predators and the paedophiles. I learned the truth about the war on drugs while I was incarcerated in Arizona. As a young person, I got interested in the stock market. I moved to Arizona from Cheshire, UK, and ended up making a couple of million in the stock market. The money went to my head. I was throwing rave parties for up to 10,000 people at a time, and I started to import ecstasy. I take full responsibility for breaking the law. I deserved my punishment, and I spent almost 6 years in the Arizona State penitentiary system. Before I got arrested, I thought that a heroin user, an addict, was somebody who lived under a bridge, went out stealing all day, lock them up and throw away the key. But spending 6 years in a state prison system where the vast majority of the prisoners were addicted to injecting heroin was the greatest education in the psychology of addiction I could ever have experienced. At one point, I had a cellmate who was using heroin, and I asked him, how many people in this building are injecting heroin? And he pointed out every single cell, 90% of the prisoners were injecting drugs. So I thought prisons were for serial killers, murderers, rapists. I had no idea that to fill these private prisons, the authorities had gone out and arrested the lowest hanging fruit. People with addiction issues. More than half of my friends in prison were soldiers who'd come back from wars with PTSD, didn't get any help, got on street drugs and ended up in prison. I learned that prison was the biggest house of the mentally ill, and about a third of them couldn't even read or write. Thinking, what is going on in the world? Why am I seeing young people with a little bit of weed get 2 to 5 year sentences because they've got prior convictions? I quickly learned that the prisons got $60,000 per prisoner per year. So to fill these private prisons, and the contracts are in the billions of dollars now, annually, the easiest people to arrest were people taking drugs, not the traffickers. Look how much money it cost to go after someone like Pablo Escobar. Millions. Arresting people for weed possession became the highest arrest category at the peak of the war on drugs. Over 500,000 arrests a year. Yet, we are being told in the UK that the police don't have the resources to go after paedophiles and predators. And why is that? Because their resources are tied up in this insane war on drugs. You've got $2 trillion has been spent in America now fighting a war on drugs, yet drugs are more widely available than ever before in the history of the world, and stronger too. Look at the fentanyl, the damage that's being caused there. Drug laws made worthless plants more valuable than gold. I've written numerous books about Pablo Escobar. He could source coca paste out of Peru or Bolivia for $60 a kilo. He was getting started in the 1970s. A kilo of coke back then was going for $60,000 on the streets. Doesn't matter who we arrest, Escobar, the Cali cartel, El Chapo. When you make a near worthless plant more valuable than gold because of drug laws, someone's always going to come in to arbitrage that profit opportunity. So we are campaigning for the war on drugs to be ended and drugs the drug market to be handed over to the government in a restricted environment and sequestered from young people. We want more education for young people and less incarceration. I am a member of LEAP, used to be called Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. And LEAP are mostly ex-cops, prosecutors, judges, campaigning to end this war on drugs. LEAP cops say things like, I joined the police to go after the predators, the murderers, the rapists, and I was assigned to infiltrate a student group, get them all smoking weed, and arrest them at the end of the month to make my quotas. This is not the purpose of the police, LEAP officers say. Prisons were designed to house people harming other people. If you go back millennia, that is how crime has been defined. Person A harms person B. Murder, robbery, rape, there's a person A and a person B. When you arrest a kid for weed possession, who is that kid hurting? At the most, themselves. Maybe it's a cry for help, or they need some kind of mentorship. The prison systems are now completely full of low-level drug users. This is how they maximize their profits. A young person comes to prison arrested for weed, and what happens? They end up on hard drugs, joining neo-Nazi gangs like the Aryan Brotherhood, getting tattoos like swastikas, SS lightning bolts, criminal records. How on earth are they going to possibly get a job? I saw people get out of the prison system heavily addicted to the hardest core drugs, and they had formed these addictions while in prison. They give them $50 at the gate when they're getting freed, and they say, have a nice day. They spend that money right away, and then they start thieving and robbing to get the drugs, to get high again from these addictions they formed inside. This is an absolute disaster for the taxpayers, because these people just come right back. They've made their criminal connections in prison, their characters inside, out on the streets, they're shunned by society. So what we have to do is address the root causes of why people are getting involved in drugs in the first place, instead of just locking people up. Most of the people in prison, I had learned, had suffered some kind of childhood trauma. Sexual abuse, physical abuse, seen parents get murdered, being thrown away by their parents and raised on the streets. When a kid suffers childhood trauma and is not given the tools to deal with it, it creates mental turmoil. And as they get older, they fall back on self-medicating through drugs to get away from that pain, to finance their drug addictions, which become heavier and heavier over time. There is a trajectory I see over and over again by interviewing these people on my podcast. If you're a man, you steal to finance your drugs, or you deal drugs yourself. If you're a woman, you usually get into sex work. And then as these people get older and older, and they're criminals, they just end up in and out of the system for the rest of their lives. If the police resources were going after the predators, and the predators were getting life sentences instead of slaps on the wrist, then there would be some actual deterrent from these predators committing these heinous crimes. There will be less victims of child abuse, less people getting involved in drugs to deal with that trauma, and less fodder for these prison systems that are just thriving from the most vulnerable people in society. Again, this is why my mission is end the war on drugs, take all of those resources to go after the predators, less incarceration for young people, and more education. It was by going through that experience of incarceration and then interviewing people with all kinds of crime stories, my worldview has been completely transformed. And once enough people in the public are aware of what's really going on with these predatory corporations profiting from the back of human suffering, I thoroughly believe and pray that changes will be made.
We are happy to have our next speaker on board for our first TEDxESCP London event, Tara Shirvani, a former ESCP student. Tara is a Forbes 30 Under 30 awardee and an international activist on climate change, disruptive technologies and digital innovation. She has over 13 years of experience developing and implementing high-profile projects and policies at the nexus of disruptive technologies, sustainability, and infrastructure. Today, she will talk about quantum computing as our way out the emerging climate crisis.
We are approaching the end of a technological age. Moore's law for computational power is not valid anymore, and the technologies forming the basis of our information society have almost reached their full potential. At the same time, we are facing severe global challenges, such as the COVID-19 pandemic and climate change, while expecting a continual improvement of people's lives and health. But in our quest to finding solutions for these challenges, we have run into a roadblock of immense amount of data that needs to be processed. But this requires an entirely different approach of computational power than currently available. And as we are running down the clock on fighting the onsets of climate change, industry heavyweights such as Bill Gates are increasingly betting on frontier technologies to get us out of the climate dilemma. Now, the latest buzz is around quantum computing, with much of the excitement stemming from the way data is processed and the exponential scale at which computational power is facilitated. Classical computers perform operations using qubits, which can only store data either as zeros or as one. However, quantum computers are relying on strange properties of quantum physics and allow for particles to exist in multiple states at once. What this means is quantum computing is all about qubits or quantum bits, and these are basic units of information used by quantum computers. Unlike regular bits, which store data as either ones or zeros, qubits take advantage of the quantum phenomenon known as superposition. This means simply that essentially exists either as ones and zeros simultaneously. The big advantage of this in computing is that it exponentially increases the amount of information you can process. Think of it as that. A pair of qubits that can exist as either ones or zeros can actually embody 4 possible states at the same time. 3 qubits can embody 8. But 300 qubits can embody more states than the atoms in the entire universe. What does that mean for us? Well, it means that processing models of analytical complexity, such as complex as molecules, which traditionally took scientists 50,000 years and more to assess, can now be analyzed in less than 1 day. Consider this simple scenario to really understand the power of quantum computing. Imagine laying a deck of 52 playing cards side by side, facing down in front of you and wanting to find the ace of hearts with as few draws as possible. To find it, a human would start turning over the cards one by one by one. A computer takes the same approach, just faster. But a quantum computer would always find the ace of hearts on the very first try, every single time. Once applied to low-emission technologies, quantum computing contributes to solutions that change how we travel, farm, reduce pollution, and all with an adoption at the scale estimated of happening within the next 5 to 10 years. This would lead to incredible progress for our societies and in our fight against climate change. This might help us design better batteries, creating more carbon-efficient fertilizers, develop more targeted medicine, because a quantum computer could run simulations before a company actually builds real-world prototypes, saving us a lot of time, money, and error rates. One very high-buzzed area of application is the field of chemistry, which will be dramatically disrupted by the development of quantum computing, because it enables the advanced simulation of molecules and reactions. The technology allows us to flawlessly model complex molecular systems at a fraction of the cost and time, leading to developments of new materials for high efficiency batteries or energy efficiency fertilizers. Normally, or currently, finding such new technologies is an expensive and daunting task, because without the ability to simulate the properties of candidate molecules a priori, it enables us to require a lot more effort. This is a big problem because, for example, global industrial production of nitrogen fertilizers alone emits more GHG emissions a year than the United Kingdom per year. And whilst existing industrial catalyst production remains responsible for 2% of global annual GHG emissions, this also comes with a hefty price tag of around $300 billion a year. Transforming these cost curves will be transformational in our fight against climate change. And the industry has picked up on this transformational power of quantum computing, with companies such as BASF, Microsoft, and IBM putting up considerable funding to replicate complex systems, such as photosynthesis, fertilizer production, and betting on collapsing cost curves as a consequence. The energy sector is also likely to be transformed by the emerging quantum technology revolution. For instance, quantum computers will be capable of optimizing power grids and predicting environmental effects of various energy producing and transportation methods without them actually be put into the real life scenarios straight away. Of course, the much higher efficiency of a quantum-based calculation device will make the energy consumption also significantly smaller than if using conventional computers for the same tasks. Also, quantum computing is likely to be superior in predicting material properties, as relevant, for instance, in the exploration of more efficient materials for batteries or photovoltaics, where the interaction between the light and the material is indeed quantum in nature. Simply put, the future, the financial and the environmental gains of this new technology could be absolutely immense. And according to research by NASDAQ, the productivity gains by end users of this technology in the form of cost savings and revenue opportunities are expected to surpass $450 billion per annum in the next 5 to 10 years. Of course, there are roadblocks still on the way, such as the energy needed to handle the rapidly increasing amount of data and information exchange on the internet. Still, without significantly increasing energy supplies in a sustainable, non-fossil fuels-based manner, we simply cannot responsibly provide enough energy with current computational methods. While we take this into consideration though, as the pace of change needs to pick up rapidly for us to move towards a zero target for the environment, for some it may feel as if we are building the plane as we fly it. Though to turn climate ambition into climate action, we will need to use all the life jackets at our disposal to ensure a safe climate emergency landing.
Our next talk will be held by Mark Edwards, a leadership coach, speaker, and photographer who's specializing on developing and capturing people's full potential in creative ways. Over the course of the past 3 years, Mark worked together with a group of strong female leaders to draw out, capture, and anchor their strongest qualities using an innovative approach combining coaching and photography. Mark's mission is to help people be and be seen for who they really are. And today, Mark will speak about what if we could see ourselves and others through a different lens.
If you can see a strength in others, you'll be loved. If you can see a strength in others they didn't even know they had, you'll be remembered forever. Research shows that the most satisfied and happy people were those who had discovered and used their unique strengths. But here's a problem. Right now, people aren't using their strengths because we're not helping people to realize what they are and supporting them to put them into practice. The polling company Gallup ran a survey of 1.7 million employees from 63 countries. They found that only 20% of people use their strengths every day. And so only a small fraction of people are being able to do what they enjoy day in and day out. This results in a lack of people experiencing their full potential. Can we even begin to imagine the impact of this in terms of lost productivity and low morale? So how can we change this and enable others to see their strengths and their greatness more often? So what can we do as leaders, co-workers, partners or friends to do this for others? Before I answer this, I'll share with you why this is so important for me. I had understood for a long time what it was to not be seen for who I really am. And so this work really spoke to me. I realized that I wasn't fully enjoying my work and I wasn't using my full strengths. I didn't see myself for who I truly was and others didn't see it. This led to feelings of frustration, stagnation and a lack of creativity. And I was stuck in only being able to do work which I had always done. I didn't know what I was capable of doing, and it took someone else to wake me up to my other talents. I learned about a process called the Reflected Best Self exercise, which I use a lot in my coaching. The way I do it, I call it being seen. You ask a number of people who are close to you for stories of times when you've been at your best. This may have been the time you organised a friend's birthday, or that time you worked around the clock to get the report out at work, etc., etc. You look through all those stories and you search for consistent themes. They may be creativity, resilience, organisation, etc. And that's really, really powerful. But I decided to add a second step to this process. I wondered, could we use psychology and photography together to authentically capture who we truly are and to use this as a powerful anchor? Well, in working with a group of 18 powerful women across 5 countries, it turns out that we can. And the majority of cases, it had a huge impact on people's levels of confidence. In terms of the process, once we'd completed step 1, so we supported people in collecting all the stories and finding out the common themes, which is powerful in and of itself, we sought to capture those qualities visually through a fun and engaging photo shoot in those locations which had a deep meaning or significance to these people. I hypothesized that this would be a powerful process because the end outcome, these powerful, beautiful photographs, which truly represent the essence of the person, are coming from 4 perspectives. Firstly, it's how the person sees themselves. Secondly, it's how their close network sees them. Thirdly, it's how the camera sees them. And fourthly, it's how I see them. Because the images are coming from these 4 perspectives, they can be believed. A person can look at this image of themselves and say, yes, this is me. These perspectives offer us the opportunity for helping others to unleash their unique strengths. This is really important because, as we all know, how we view ourselves is rarely as positive as how others may view us. And so, whilst many of these pictures are beautiful and moving, they were deeply impactful and even life-changing for some of the people. We were seeking to capture a strength that was there and unleash it. And years later, many of the people made different life decisions based on what they experienced through the process. I noticed this was a great tool in leadership development as well. As we started on a journey, I began to see how we can create a person in how we see them. We can think about this simply. When we view somebody positively or negatively, we then unconsciously look for evidence to back up this view. As I began to choose how I saw each person according to their strengths, opportunities kept arising for them to show up or be seen in this way. In short, we began to change reality. When I was looking for a particular quality, we found it. And this is the key lesson that I learned from this entire process. That if we see or create someone in a particular way, they can start to live into this reality. Often I or the camera would sometimes pick up a personal quality that they had not even seen in themselves. And we started to amplify this more and more and more, looking out for and accentuating the unique qualities. From time to time, I would say things like, can you see this quality? Or can you see play? Or can you see creativity coming out? With Ambika, for example, we were able to reconnect her to her sense of play, that part of her which she had loved the most, but which had disappeared in recent years. With Eva, it was reconnecting her to her own sense of power, creativity and style, which as a new mum were strengths she had begun to disconnect with. The same is true in leadership. If we can help another person identify and own their own innate strengths, they'll begin to see opportunities to powerfully use this. If you correctly identify someone as, let's say, a creative, he'll be bolder to express his creativity in a highly creative marketing campaign. If someone has a gift for organisation and you help her to see it, she may just have the extra 10% of confidence to organise an incredible event. So I'd like to share some real-worked examples with you. Let's start with Antonia. One of her qualities which we identified was her incredible ability to connect with people using humour. I was looking for this quality to capture as we were walking down London's South Bank. For some reason, a sofa had been left outside of a shop for collection. I asked Antonia to sit on it and to invite other people to sit down next to her for a chat. It was a strange request to make, but I had this sense of what could unfold. I stepped away and saw her speak with firemen, priests, families, and eventually to these Japanese tourists. I managed to capture the moment when Antonia told a joke and made the two ladies and herself laugh out loud. Now this resulted in powerfully anchoring this quality within Antonia. As she said herself, this experience left me with the freedom to be free, to lose myself in the moment and to be human. Another lady, Vera, had unfortunately lost her husband a year before we worked together. She wanted to reclaim some of her unique strengths. The location we chose was the beach at The Hague. This location brought back great memories for her of times when she played there as a young girl with her parents. We captured her strength of energy and aliveness through her racing across the beach, barefoot, smiling and laughing into the camera. The quality we were most seeking next was love. I took the risk of asking Vera's new boyfriend to join us on the beach. I asked them to both look into each other's eyes, and this is what we created. And what was created and captured was beyond words. These images, as with many of the ladies, served as a powerful reminder of their greatest strengths. Years later, Vera said that this moment, this project made me step up for a next stage, be courageous and firmly on my feet again. I saw that I could love again unconditionally with zero expectations. Having the combination as a coach and a photographer, I saw something magically happen. In the whole process of being seen, I started to name what I saw. I saw a leader, I saw love, I saw resilience. And the magic is that once I could see it and help other people to see it for themselves, they embodied it. And this isn't about me. You can do this too. You can look into someone's eyes and name the quality you see in them, and it can make a real difference to that person. So can it work the other way around? Can we use the process back on ourselves? Well, I believe we can. In addition to my leadership work, I'd always dreamt of being a travel photographer. And one day I shared this with my good friend Steffi. She looked at me and said, "Mark, your photos are amazing and you've got everything it takes to do this. You're great with people, you're a connector, you're creative." And these were qualities I knew I had, but I didn't fully own before. As a direct consequence of this and that conversation, I carried the photo book with her and I took all the photos. And the book's been recognised by some of the leading photography and travel magazines globally. Now, I had had no formal photography training. I'd had zero travel writing experience. But here's the thing. Steffi saw the photographer in me, and this was enough to give me the confidence to do something I would not otherwise have done. So can we see ourselves through a different lens with someone else's help? Yes, we can. If there's one thing I really want you to take away from this talk, it is how to see and create someone in a new way. For me, photography was a powerful tool. How you help others to discover and embed their strengths is entirely up to you. For example, empathic listening, creative challenges, conversations, exercises, games. Whatever you decide to do, most importantly, it's about identifying the strengths and finding the opportunities to reinforce them. So just to make it simple, I recommend 6 steps. Be clear, this isn't about you. Empty your mind and be totally focused on the other person. Ask the other person for examples of times when they've been at their best, when they've been at their greatest. As part of this, ask them to gather this data from trusted family, friends, and colleagues. Help the other person to look for the themes like we've discussed. Offer your own take on some of their strengths. Anchor it within them. Find the right words to powerfully convey to the person so they really get it. Like with photography, this stage is about helping the other person to see it and own it for themselves. Finally, reinforce. Find a way to help the person to use these strengths as soon as possible. This will strengthen the strengths. Whichever method you use, help the person to create a memorable experience whilst using their strengths so they can always be remembered and called upon when required. Be aware of the power we all have to change others' reality in an instant. The deepest need we all have is to be seen. And so, what if today you could see someone you know through a fresh lens and help them to see something in themselves they have not seen before?
Having heard 5 amazing talks so far, it is time for a short 10-minute break. Grab a coffee, tea, wine, or whatever you fancy. We will be back in 10 minutes with the second half of our event and the 5 remaining speakers.
Welcome back from the break, everyone. Let's get the second half of this event started with our next speaker, Dr. Nupur Kohli. Being fascinated by the human body and how it works, she obtained her master's degree in medicine at the University of Amsterdam. Afterwards, she did her fundamentals of business studies at the Harvard Business School. With her distinguished roles in the World Economic Forum and UNICEF Netherlands, she is a multi-award-winning healthcare leader. And today, she will talk about women in healthcare technology.
In 2019, the world population consisted of almost 7.7 billion people. 49.6% of the world population was female in 2019, which is 3.8 billion women. That is a big number. Women play a big role in the health of our world, but women's health is at a crossroads, says the WHO. And the following is coming from reports of UN Women. Did you know that it is estimated that 60% of chronically hungry people worldwide are women and girls? While, on average, women make up about 43% of the agricultural labor force in developing countries. Also, women make up more than 2/3 of the world's 796 million illiterate people. Data from 68 countries indicates that a women's education is a key factor in determining a child's survival. Educated women are more likely to have greater decision-making power within their households, and research has indicated that when more income is in the hands of women, child nutrition, health, and education improves. Further, maternal health is a human right. Yet, every 90 seconds, a woman dies during pregnancy or childbirth. Most of these deaths are preventable, but due to the gender-based discrimination many women experience, they are not given the proper education or care they need. The pandemic affected women the hardest. According to the World Economic Forum's Gender Gap Report, closing the gender gap has increased by a generation during the pandemic, from 99.5 years to 135.6 years. This is astonishing, and it will be a challenge to do something about this. These are all factors that show we need to empower women in different ways. One way is to empower them through access to health and especially technology for their health. Women's health is therefore worth investing in. But let us take a look now at women in healthcare. If we look at the share of women among all women workers employed around the world in health and social work, in most of the countries, more than 50% of the women work in that sector. In the United States, according to a report from McKinsey, nurses are more than 80% women. And according to UN Women, women even make up 70% of the health and social workforce. Yet, only 30% of leaders in the global health sector are women. So, although it gets better, looking at closing the gender gap, we need more women in leadership in the health sector. In the future of healthcare is the increased use of technology. When we need more women leaders in the health sector, this means that we especially also need more women in the health technology sector. Until today, more men than women are designing and developing technology for healthcare. This, while women make more use of healthcare. Data on the annual per capita healthcare spending by gender and age group for the United States by the Kaiser Family Foundation shows that women from the age of 19 years spend more on healthcare than men. Some say that is why Femtech, which refers to software, diagnostics, products, and services that use technology to support women's health, is on the rise. Femtech aims to give women more control over their health and lives. However, that is not enough. We need overall more female leadership, both in the health sector as well as in the health technology sector, to have more gender balance and a better effect for women's health. So, how can we start doing this? First, we need to keep promoting gender diversity. Looking at the pharma, biotech, and device subsectors, gender diversity is especially important in composing the development and marketing teams for therapies and solutions to treat conditions that disproportionately affect women. This enables companies to more authentically and responsibly market to female patients. This is according to another McKinsey report. Second, we need to create an interest and good future for women who aspire to have a leading role in healthcare technology. The beneficial opportunities should be clear. Also, how the role can have real added value to women's health and society. Then third, show the world who are those influential women in healthcare technology. They are there, but can you name one of them right away? This may not be easy for everyone. When the world knows about these female leaders in healthcare technology, girls and women can follow these role models, and then they will start seeing these roles as an option for themselves too. Fourth, we need to connect the regular healthcare sector and the healthcare technology sector more. Not only that, we need to connect the regulators, the healthcare sector and healthcare technology sector, and strengthen this triangle. Then we can book rapid progress in involving more women in the process. The pandemic has shown us that our health systems need change and strengthening. Through cooperation, we can make that possible. There is a lack of correlation between women working in healthcare and women in healthcare technology. Also, when looking at the women healthcare workforce and technology, according to OECD statistical data, female health workers remain underrepresented in highly skilled occupations. In highly skilled occupations, women also need more technical skills. But as the women are not in these occupations, they can also not develop these. So, we spoke about leadership. Women need to lead from the front. But there is more we need to pay attention to when it comes to the transformative role of women in healthcare technology. One is improving research. For technologies used by women and related to women issues, women in technology and healthcare technology can play a big role in developing the systems that are more user-friendly, a majority of which are women. When more female researchers are involved and we include more women participants in research, we will get a better focus on solutions for women in healthcare. Did you know a female heart is different from a male's heart? A woman's heart and some of its chambers are smaller than men's. The walls that divide the chambers are also thinner, and also the veins are finer. These are a few examples of the differences. Cardiovascular disease is among the top causes of death for women. This is one of the aspects to also take into account when we develop technology solutions in healthcare. So, what more is there? Training. There need to be more women technology experts to train the medical staff and doctors to use medical-related instruments. In many countries and cultures, women like to be trained by women. But not only this, furthermore, why do we need more women technology experts, especially in healthcare, is because in the future tasks in healthcare will be replaced by technology and robots. When employees from healthcare can make the switch to another sector, in this case, the healthcare technology sector, this will be beneficial to prevent job losses and, in time, reskilling. What is my own story of healthcare with technology? Why do I find it important that we pay attention to this topic? Because I see the shift taking place in healthcare from traditional medicine to technology-led medicine. I studied medicine, and I slowly see the role of the doctor changing from practicing to more management and leadership in healthcare, also technology management. We can only make these transitions happen when we in time pay attention to the opportunities and challenges. When we look at the current pandemic, I want to give you an example where we could have done better. In a recent example of the situation of COVID-19 exploding in many countries, staff was not trained to run oxygen machines and ventilators. Women trained in healthcare technology could have played a big role in saving many lives. So, what can the future be? What is the transformative part in the contribution of women? Not only raising and using their voice, not only contributing to connecting technology with healthcare, but especially to together think on how we with healthcare technology can strengthen our healthcare systems. What does our healthcare system need at the moment? What are the pressing issues? This will be a continuous process to explore. So, overall, this will be a win-win situation for health, independence, and empowerment of women. We need to strengthen the role of women in healthcare technology. At some point in our lives, maybe now or later, we will experience healthcare. And what kind of healthcare do we want for our future and that of our children? With that question in mind, we should strive for the best, and we can only do that when we work together to make it happen.
Our next speaker, Dr. Cath Bishop, is a former Olympic rower who won Olympic silver in Athens 2004. She also served as a diplomat for the British Foreign Office and specialized in policy and negotiations in conflict issues. Today, Cath is a business consultant, leadership coach, and author of a new book, The Long Win: The Search for a Better Way to Succeed. As a former top athlete, negotiation specialist, and leadership coach, who would be better equipped than her to explain why winning in business is not just about coming first? Welcome, Dr. Cath Bishop.
Victoria Pendleton said that she didn't feel like celebrating at all after she won Olympic gold in Beijing. Johnny Wilkinson, the legendary England rugby player, said that he expected joy to follow winning the World Cup, but in his own words, the joy never came. Andre Agassi, after winning his first Grand Slam at Wimbledon, said that he felt like he'd been let in on a dirty secret. Winning changes nothing. The legendary Mark Spitz, the swimmer who won 7 gold medals in Munich in 1972, said that he could not believe that after that success, he wasn't guaranteed a life full of lasting fulfillment, and he never recovered or created a life after that moment. Sport often mirrors business and the rest of society. Over in business, Fred Goodwin, the chief executive of the Royal Bank of Scotland, was described as a serial winner. He had to win, is what all of his colleagues explained when interviewed after the financial crash, because in February 2008, after a series of ambitious takeover bids, Fred Goodwin presided over the largest annual corporate loss in British history, £24 billion, requiring an unprecedented British government bailout. Over in Volkswagen, those emissions engineers had to meet the targets that they were set. They had to create a solution that would work, that would hit the impossibly high performance and price targets, which they did, except the way they did it was illegal. And Group Chief Executive Martin Winterkorn was criminally indicted in the US on charges of fraud and conspiracy. Rolls-Royce, that great British company, was pursued for years and had a long-running scandal that resulted in £6.71 million of penalties because of the ways in which it had gone about winning valuable contracts abroad. Winning is held up as being the driver of all things good that we should strive for, that will drive performance higher. But we should also be alert to the dangers that in certain contexts, winning can kill collaboration, can drive poor decision-making, poor teamworking, and at times lead to reputational ruin and financial ruin alongside, and even a life behind bars. When I teach on business school programs, supporting leaders and executives to learn how to develop teams better, I always want to try and focus on the how, but this theme of winning is ever present. I want to look at how we're working, how we're thinking, how we're making decisions, our beliefs that we bring to things, the way that we behave and interact. But everyone is always aware of, surely we've got to be winning. If I set up an exercise and create some groups, before I've given any objectives, there can immediately be the sense that the groups are needing to compete against each other, to outdo each other, to make sure they look better to the one alongside them. That behavior reduces the opportunity to learn, reduces any opportunity to collaborate and share ideas and explore and co-create new ways of doing things. It doesn't drive performance at all. But winning is all around us. We hear about it at school, we learn about it from our teachers and our parents. We see it on the television, we hear it in advertising, we see it on the billboards, it's in the Hollywood films, it's everywhere. But over time, we have developed a very narrow sense of what winning looks like, that's short-term and short-lived and often determined by others, not something that we really buy into. And in many of those cases, winning is holding us back. We need to redefine what winning really means, because there are too many occasions in life where what is held up to be winning actually does not offer anything meaningful or lasting beyond a single moment. If we look back at the etymology, at the words winning, competition, then we find something quite different. The word winning is derived from two meanings that have the concepts of effort and joy at their heart. Not beating others, not being the best, being superior, effort and joy. If we look at the word competition, it goes back to competere in Latin, which means to strive together. Not striving against others, vanquishing, destroying, defeating others, being the best. It's about striving together. And that offers us a way to start to redefine success that might help us for the world that we find ourselves in. These binary definitions of winning and losing that we hear all of the time in the media reports, whether it's in education, politics, business, or sport. Maybe they worked for a binary conventional world a couple of centuries ago, But the issues we face today are complex. They are not issues to be won and lost, whether it's environmental protection, social inequality, global health, global trade, or global security. These are not issues that any one person can be the best at, can defeat others in. They need all of us to work together to find new ways to adapt and be ready to tackle these complex, ongoing, lasting issues. In businesses, we face challenges and issues of how to cope with fast advancing technology, the need to harness a much more diverse pool of talent and be aware of the environmental and social impact of our organizations. Again, these aren't tick box exercises. They require a different mindset, a different way of behaving, and a different way of interacting and creating relationships across the whole network that we're involved in. It's time to redefine what success looks like, and the long win offers us a new approach. The long win is based on 3 principles, 3 ways of thinking, if you like, which I call the 3 C's: clarity, constant learning, and connection. These aren't just things to be ticked off, to be done at an away day. They are an ongoing themes to help us keep on track, to make sure we don't get sidetracked by this short-termism, by these easy metrics that we think define success until we get to them and we realize that they don't necessarily hold the key to anything of lasting value. Clarity, first of all. Clarity is about clarifying what matters. Not just what's easy to measure, not just short-term metrics, but clarifying what matters over the longer term. Tapping into that sense of purpose. Why do we exist? Why do our teams exist? Why do our organizations exist? Not just at an away day once a year, but bringing that purpose into every interaction that we have, every meeting that we have, every team conversation that we have, every project decision that we make. Making sure we are clarifying what matters, not just doing things that are in front of us or that are easy to measure. Part of that is clarifying how we do things, not just the what. There is no international level sports team that would dream of competing and trying to perform to its best without clarifying how it works together. That's not something you leave to chance because it's too crucial to performance. And yet in organizations, we are often so focused on the what, on the quantity of tasks and issues that we have to do, that we don't always explore the how. In sport, we've been freed up somewhat by the fact that we can't just increase what we do. Often an elite athlete will train 3 times a day, 7 days a week, most weeks of the year, perhaps as much as 6 hours of physical training a day, sometimes even more. All of the time, that athlete is looking to go faster, is looking to improve their performance, to get to the next level. Another hour in the gym, though, is not the answer. An all-nighter is certainly not the key to performance either. The athlete then starts to look at the quality of their training, how they are going about it, the environment in which they are training, the culture, the mindsets, the less easily visible aspects of how they're performing, and starts to improve all of these. They give us a rich way to improve that isn't just about doing more, but about doing things differently by clarifying what really matters. The second C of the long win is constant learning. That gives us a theme that will take us through the highs and lows of our career, that will take us through success and failure and keep us moving on. If we look at the research around resilience, leadership, performance, we see this theme recurring time and time again, that learning is critical to optimizing what's possible, to exploring, to growing individually and collectively. Putting learning at the heart of our picture of success is essential if we really want to explore what we are capable of together. Constant learning is an approach that is something that sits at the heart of the performance world in sport. Athletes know that in order to be at their best, they can't guarantee that they're going to win, but what they can do is guarantee they have maximized making improvements every single day. They still want to win. Of course, that hasn't changed, and that's fine. It's good to be trying to be at our best. But athletes need to accept, and do now through sports psychology and the developments that have been made in how to support athletes to perform at their best, that they can't control those results. The results depend on external factors to a degree. Maybe the weather, maybe umpires or referees, whether you're injury-free or not, whether the event is even happening. What an athlete controls, though, is their performance. They separate out their performance from the results that they can't control. The best way to optimize those results is to optimize their performance, to maximize all of the elements that they can improve every day. And so they set out to improve those, not just the easily measurable ones, not just the ones that involve technique and how many weights you're lifting and how fast you go, but also your mindset, how you're communicating with colleagues, how you're collaborating, and how you're recovering in between sessions, even how you're switching off to ensure that real break from the intensity of training. Performance and improving performance, not just obsessing about results in the future, is the key to athletes optimizing the results that they then get. It's also part of how they review when they're racing or training, always looking at what are they learning. Because it doesn't actually matter whether you've won or lost a race, you still want to go fast next time. I won some international races, I still did things wrong. I did some things really well and I wanted to capture those, and there were things that I could improve for next time. It was exactly the same if I lost a race. I often did things that were really, really good and some things that needed to be improved. So why would I change my approach based on the results? Athletes learn to review their performance regardless of results and to get really good at that. Otherwise, there's a danger that that obsession with winning takes away from the opportunity to learn and optimize that next step of progress. Constant learning sits at the heart of performance, of growth, of motivation as well. The third C of the long win is connection, because human connections, relationships, sit at the heart of everything that we do. We cannot succeed alone. So let's prioritize those. Let's put those first, not last on the list of what we do. Quite often I find that we have habits in organizations that focusing on the to-do list, on the tasks that we have to do, not the relationships that will enable us to do those tasks in the best way. We look at meetings and we see agenda items and action points. We don't see the people around the room that we are working with, but that's perhaps who we should put first. We should make sure we're scheduling time or reviewing each day and thinking, how have I connected with someone today in a way that's really moved our relationship on, that I've learned something about them beyond simply the subject matter we discussed in a meeting, that I'm deepening my connections and understanding through that a different perspective on the world, exploring my own potential by bringing in the perspectives of others. As I worked as a diplomat, relationships sat at the heart of everything that we did. As an Olympic rower, relationships sat at the heart of performance too. Actually, I think in all our organizations, relationships sit at the heart of performance. As a diplomat, I enjoyed that process and the opportunity to really explore how we influence others, how we prioritize relationships, and realize that success only comes through the strength of those relationships. I can remember thinking and learning from other negotiators around me, the importance of connecting beyond the subject matter you're negotiating, of understanding the worldview, the perspective that others are bringing around the room. You will not persuade them by the force of your own arguments, by having the best solution, the best ideas. You will persuade others, I was advised and saw in practice, by knowing and really understanding how they see the world, by understanding what they want, what they really care about and why, so that then you can start together to co-create something that didn't exist before. Simply trying to win, simply having a zero-sum game mindset that means the strongest, the best idea wins, doesn't lead to good, sustainable solutions. It usually leads to somebody leaving or a solution that will stall and break down very quickly. It's that ability to create common ground with others around you, that shared sense of purpose, that connection about something that really has lasting value, that will enable you to move the business, discussion, the sports opportunity within a team, whatever it might be, whatever that situation is, the diplomatic negotiation forward. Clarity, constant learning and connection. These are themes that help us tap into deeper parts of who we are and how we operate. I'm frequently told not to challenge our concepts of winning because that's just how we are. It's how we've been created. We're wired to win, but we're not wired to win in a short-term way, or we're only partly wired to win. There's a part of our brains that responds to short-term, that dopamine hit, that target that we reach, that medal we get round our neck. But then what? We're left chasing another one, the next one, with diminishing returns, when in fact we could play to a different part of our brains, the ones that responds to meaning and purpose and things that have lasting value. The long win is not about lowering standards. It's not about trying to dilute what we're capable of. It's the opposite. It's about being more ambitious, beyond simply who comes first, beyond simply awarding winners' medals in narrow categories. It gives us an opportunity to redefine success through a clearer sense of purpose, with a constant learning process to take us throughout our lives, throughout the highs and lows of the milestones along the way, and to really value the human connections in everything that we do. We have cut ourselves off from a better way to succeed, and it is time to reconnect with the long win in order to help us to explore our potential, to explore all of the possibilities together in a better way. Thank you.
What differentiates our next speaker from all other speakers today? Kess Eruteya belongs to the so-called Generation Z. Kess is the founder of Inclusion Z, a keynote speaker on Generation Z, diversity and inclusion, as well as the corporate social responsibility. With her young age of 20 years, she's an example for the next generation entering the business world, driven, placing emphasis on community over competition and hungry for changes. For this reason, Kess will now give us an overview on how Generation Z can be the impact leaders of tomorrow.
Hi, my name is Kess Eruteya. Now that I've introduced myself, I would like to ask for a favour. I want everyone to close their eyes for a moment and think of their earliest childhood memory. How old were you in this memory? What were you doing? And how did that moment shape who you are today? Okay, you can open your eyes now. Most of the time when I ask this question, people recall a moment between 3 and 8 years old. So I'm willing to bet yours is in the same time frame too. When questioned about your earliest childhood memory, some of you may have thought of a happy interaction with a parent, grandparent, or another relative. On the other hand, some of you may have thought of a traumatic experience. No matter what came to mind during that exercise, it's likely that your childhood interactions influence you as an adult today. One of my earliest memories was using BlackBerry Messenger, also known as BBM, to talk to my friends. The group chat feature was a highlight of my youth. Every day after school, I'd rush home to see what was new in the group chat and use the ping feature to annoy my friends. At the age of 8, I learned how to navigate a phone. At 14, I figured out I can connect with anyone around the world using the internet. Meanwhile, my parents didn't have access to a mobile device until they were young adults. At the age of 8, to them, a BlackBerry was just a piece of fruit. Using social media and mobile devices has always been a way of life for me. I can't imagine a world without the internet. Meanwhile, my parents talk about a time where things were a lot simpler. I don't think they understand my perspective. I recognise this as a generational difference, because they're Generation X and I'm Generation Z, meaning I'm between the ages of 9 and 24 and they're between the ages of 41 and 56. Now, I won't tell you how old my parents are, because my mum likes their age to remain a mystery. But I will tell you this. As a Gen Zer, my worldview has always been shaped by having access to anything I want, enabling me to solve problems fast and achieve great results. At the age of 19, I started my own company called Inclusion Z. We are a community-driven e-learning platform bridging the gap between corporations and the future of work. Inclusion Z is currently being used in over 19 countries and is driving social impact. Every day, I get to connect with a wide range of young professionals and students. Doing so has helped me expand my perspective of life and do my part in changing the world. Having access to the internet at such a young age positioned me to achieve more business success at 19 than most people from previous generations. Throughout history, there has always been a few leaders in each generation to shift culture and change the world. Whether it was Martin Luther King, a civil rights activist who helped lay the foundation for racial equality, or Steve Jobs, who led a digital revolution, or Hedy Lamarr, who invented the technology that makes Wi-Fi. They all had one thing in common. They were willing to step out the social norm and take action. My generation does not remember a time before the internet or smartphones. Research shows we often trust social media influencers more than traditional experts or the news. Generation Z has only known a time where with a click of a button, almost anything we want can be delivered to our doorstep in less than an hour. We are digital natives who have been using mobile devices all our lives. While Gen Z is surrounded by misconceptions of being self-obsessed, entitled, and overly emotional, I believe we are more connected than any other generation, which makes us unified. A famous African proverb says, "If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together." Well, I say Generation Z has learned to go fast and far together. When something happens around the world, we immediately find out since we're always connected on social media. So whether something happens in our community or another country, we feel compelled to take action. We believe we have the ability and responsibility to make the world a better place. In fact, 62% of Generation Z believe our generation will drive positive impact to the world. This generation brings a needed voice for various issues, and we're willing to express our opinions, unlike previous generations who were taught to remain silent. Generation Z is on track to be the most educated generation yet. All the information we want is literally at our fingertips. In our generation, there are not just a few people who want to make impact, but a majority. In 2019, we outnumbered millennials and made 32% of the world's population. So let's put that into context, with 62% of us wanting to drive positive impact. Just imagine the world in 20 years for the children who were just born, with so many trailblazers in our society. Just listen to some of these quotes from fellow Gen Zers. "Whenever I'm bored, I can always find something to do on my phone. My goal is to travel and start an organization to help people. When I turn 14, I want to get a job to support my business on eBay and help it scale. Can you imagine a 13-year-old running a successful business on eBay? Some may say he's too young to start a business. Well, I say he's just the right age, because he's getting results and you can't argue with results. During the early period of starting Inclusion Z, a corporate client saw my age as a weakness. A senior member of staff said it would be best fit for someone older to lead the project. However, as the project progressed, it was clear that age does not determine results. Companies should understand that youth is one of our strengths. The secret ingredient to our success is really our drive for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Generation Z is the most diverse generation in history. We represent the growing ethnic and racial diversity of the world, with 48% of us identifying as non-white. It's not only crucial to understand those younger, but to understand a generation more inclusive. Inclusion Z conducted a worldwide study around Gen Z attributes, which revealed 63% of Gen Z believe in sharing and exploring new ideas and experiences that promote diversity. But why is diversity so important? It will inspire creativity and drive innovation, promote effective target marketing to increase sales, engage the best talent by drawing from a culturally diverse talent pool, encourage a broader and more adaptable selection of goods and services, and increase productivity, creating a greater opportunity for personal and professional growth. Now that you've heard all of that, what words come to mind when you think of Generation Z? For me, it's the impact leaders of tomorrow. Just think about all the problems the world is currently facing. Generation Z has solutions, and we are not afraid to step out the social norm and take action. We are shaping a world where your children and grandchildren will learn to thrive in the power of technology, innovation, diversity, equality, community, and the desire to make the world a better place. We are the impact leaders of tomorrow.
Next up is Mary Dinah. Mary has acquired degrees from Oxford University, Harvard University, and Nottingham University, amongst others. Today, she is the CEO of Mary Dinah Foundation, an NGO established with the focus on improving health, welfare, and productivity of women around the world. More than ever before, we realize the world is incredibly connected. Hence, we have a collective responsibility to seek to improve the welfare of others around us. Mary Dinah will be sharing her journey as a humanitarian and philanthropist with us today.
Hello everyone, my name is Mary Dinah and I'm the founder of the Mary Dinah Foundation. Today I would like to take you through the journey of my personal transformation from entrepreneur to a social entrepreneur. I'd like to start with a story. My father, when I was younger, he would always ask me, what would I like to be when I grow up? And I really didn't know. And I would just say, I don't know, I'm not sure. And he would say, okay, think about it this way. Where do you see yourself? What sort of environment do you see yourself? Do you see yourself in a hospital? Or do you see yourself in a courtroom? Or do you see yourself on planes? The world is your oyster. Just think about it and ponder on where you see yourself. And I remember always saying, well, I really like meeting new people. and making people smile. And so as time went on, I studied hospitality and hotel management, and I studied MSc in International Hotel Management at the University of Surrey, and then I started working with the Marriott Hotel Group. And absolutely, I was meeting people and putting smiles on people's faces and fluffing pillows in nicely designed rooms and welcoming people for their birthdays or anniversaries. And that was all very special. And hospitality is still very dear to my heart, and definitely all things hotelier. However, as time went on, something changed in my story. And I'd like to share with you the triggers that brought that transformation to being. Firstly, I set up a hotel management company called MAD Hospitality, and we were doing really well. We were signing on boutique hotels and taking over management, transforming the human resources of the hotel, the service excellence, the food and beverage. And so it got to a point where we had signed on this wonderful boutique hotel by the riverside in Nigeria. And I was so excited about taking on this new project. And the first thing that I had to do was change the management team, because the old management had left. They had left some people behind, and we needed to do a complete overhaul to turn the hotel around. So we had quite a number of vacancies, and we started looking for people. We were looking for receptionists, we were looking for chefs, we were looking for concierge staff, we were looking for housekeepers. And every day I would sit in a boardroom with my team, my core team, and we just kept interviewing and interviewing and interviewing. And we were not able to find the right skills that we needed at that particular hotel. And that's when I realized that there was a major problem in Nigeria at that time in terms of finding skill set for companies. And I remember this very vividly. It was on a Sunday morning. A tragedy happened in 2014. The government put out an advertisement to employ 1,000 people into a government agency. Given that the unemployment rate in Nigeria is about 20%, with a 50% youth unemployment rate and a 50% female unemployment rate, you can imagine that tens of thousands of people stormed the campus and the field where they were doing this recruitment. And unfortunately, there was a stampede and 7 people lost their lives. 7 people. And for me, that was an absolute turning point. I just thought, there is a major problem, and it's become so dire. We were looking for people, we couldn't find the right people. They were looking for jobs, they couldn't find the right employers. And so it's more a case of a mismatch. Yes, there are very talented people in the society, in the communities, but they couldn't find us, and we couldn't find them. And so I set out and set up Nigeria's first ever job center, which is called JobLink. And we, for the first time, opened our doors in a major commercial part of Lagos and welcomed people to come in with their physical CVs. And if they didn't have these CVs, well, they could email CVs as well, but if they didn't have CVs, we were actually able to create CVs for them by asking them questions about their employment history, about their skill set, and we then created a unique software to be able to parse those details and make it very searchable and connect them with jobs. The result was that we connected 10,000 people with gainful employment. We did CV clinics for 2,000 people and employability training for 3,000 people. That job center also became a pilot for the government, who then created 5 more job centers across Lagos. And so while I was, speaking with young girls in schools about their careers on the back of JobLink, I entered the school system and I realized that there was no school feeding. as well as a few other issues. But the one that really touched my heart the most was school feeding. And I thought, this is not right. We can't expect people to go to school and not have food to eat. And so once again, I had identified a problem, and I created a solution of sort, at least in my own power with our resources at the time. So we started school feeding nursery schools in Lagos State, and we couldn't afford to feed too many. So we started with 30 young girls. When I say young, they were actually really young. So they're 2-year-old girls. And we started feeding them, and we couldn't afford to feed them every day, so we would feed them every Friday, something special and nice, and we'd take to the schools. And they realized that they saw an increase in attendance, especially in girls, in that school, because in certain parts of the world, girls are sort of kept back home to do house chores. But when they have school feeding, the parents feel as though there's a greater incentive to send the girl child to school, which is incredibly important. And so I was motivated by the success we had and the impact we had made through that initiative, which was called Food for Thought. And from there, we then partnered with a few other international organizations, such as Microsoft Philanthropies, UNICEF, and quite a number of other international organizations and donors. From feeding 30 people in one nursery school, we are now feeding 4 million meals in eastern part of Nigeria, providing food for women and children in crisis areas that have been ravaged by war, by ongoing insurgency. There are many cases of gender-based violence that we see. We've created referral pathways for people to get counseling and get treatment and help in those situations. We do security training so that they're better able to defend themselves in that kind of environment. We do WASH trainings, which is water and sanitization hygiene, especially now with COVID and the situation. It's so important. And now we're expanding. We're expanding from 4 million meals, hopefully to 25 million meals by the end of the year. We're expanding westward in West Africa. So from Nigeria, we're expanding now to Togo and Ghana and possibly Liberia. And all of this has changed my life. And that's really, for me, the transformation that I've had. When people send us letters thanking us for the work that we're doing, I always say to them, no, thank you. You have changed my life. You have given me so much more than I have given you. I wake up every day excited about my work, excited about changing lives, excited about turning situations around, being relevant as possible as I can. And I know that I've found my deepest passion. When I think back to that young girl that would tell my dad, I want to put smiles on people's faces, I thought that was hospitality, that was welcoming people in hotels. And to a large extent, yes, it was that. But this is also putting smiles on people's faces in a much bigger, certainly much more important way, shall we say. And yeah, so that's my personal transformation. Thank you very much for listening. And I certainly hope that we all search deep within and think about our skill set and how we can use those to find our own passion, find our own peace, and at the same time change other people's lives. Thank you very much.
How comparable do you think are biology and business? Well, our next speaker is an expert in both respective areas. Professor Dr. Ditmar Hilpert holds master's degrees in biology and economics and PhDs in toxicology and pharmacology. That biology can in fact affect business is something that we've all seen over the course of the past year. Dr. Hilpert, however, already thematized pandemics as a possible event for the future in his lectures in the 1990s. And today, he will show us that biology and business are in fact very comparable, and what we can learn from the animal kingdom and animal behavior to evolve into better and successful managers.
I ask myself very often what makes a person a business leader. Who are business leaders? People will tell you Steve Jobs was a business leader. Bill Gates is a business leader. But I ask myself, if Bill Gates had to restart Microsoft, would he be as successful as he was? Jack Welch was a business leader, a superman. He was the manager of the century of the last century. Elon Musk is a business leader. He's a gifted, probably the most gifted storyteller today. So what do management gurus tell us about leaders? Professor Malik from the University of St. Gallen tells us top managers would have to be a crossbreed between an ancient general, a Nobel Prize winner in physics, and a television showmaster. Professor Benes, who was professor at the University of Southern California, told us today MBA programs are harshly criticized for failing to provide useful skills, adequately prepare leaders, and teach standards of ethical behavior. And Professor Mintzberg, McGill University, tells us, how can management be a profession if the learning material of managers can't even be specified? Because a profession requires knowledgement in a field of study or science, and management is not a science. This is actually a problem for all business people. Okay, let's look what a leader is. In the classic of the modern times, let's look into Google. If you look for the word leader, you have 1.4 billion research results. Leadership, around 1 billion research results. Okay, there's no help. Perhaps we find a clear definition in recent management literature. Definitely, I think Amazon will help us. Let's look for leadership. And what do we find? There are over 60,000 books that are referenced on leadership. And I personally think everybody who after 10 beers still can pronounce the word leadership is willing to write a book. Jack Welch, for example, wrote 4 books within 3 years with his wife, Susie Welch, and they are contradictory. I find a nice book, Leaders, from Warren Bennis. And Warren Bennis tells us managers focus on systems. Leaders focus on people. Managers depend on control. Leaders inspire trust. Managers accept the status quo. Leaders challenging the status quo. Managers imitate and re-imitate. Leaders create new things. Is there perhaps help from the classical literature on strategy by militarists? Tacitus tells us, omnium consensu capax imperii nisi immerasset. Everyone thought he was a leader until he took the lead. And the old Greeks tell us, panta rei, everything flows. This goes back to the Greek philosopher Heraclit, and he tells us, you can't step into the same river twice, for other waters are continuously flowing. Whoa, great ideas. Sun Tzu, or as the Chinese tell us, Sun Tzu, in his book of Art of War, tells us these are the traits of a leader: wisdom, sincerity, goodwill, courage, and straightforwardness. He's even the first person to describe what a SWOT analysis is. Von Clausewitz, his book is probably one of the most read in literature, tells us a successful leader is the genius of strategy. He has the mind to see the dim light of truth and has the courage to follow that light. But there are some problems, he calls them frictions, which distinguish the real world from that on paper. Today we would say Murphy's Law. There's a fog of uncertainty. Information is often contradictory and not correct. Human perception is irrational. You need, as a leader, a great inner strength, and you have to decide and tell the others your decision and make them follow you. A former student of mine told me once a quote of Bruce Henderson. Bruce Henderson is the founder of Boston Consulting Group. And the quote is, "Biologists are better advisors for companies than economists." I'm both an economist and a biologist. And I'm definitely convinced our genes, our hormones, and our experiences control our leadership behavior. Can we actually find leadership examples in nature? Okay, our management environment, this is what literature tells us, is about leadership, is about organization, is about teamwork and knowledge management. Let's look for examples. Leadership in the wolf pack. We have a clear hierarchy. We have loyalty relationships. All these data I'm presenting are out of game reserves. But I think a company is comparable to a game reserve because both things are enhanced. There are the alpha male, sometimes accompanied by alpha females. They protect their beta males. The beta males make sure that the pack is run according to rules and hierarchies accepted. The pack has to obey. Then they are supported by their leaders. If you don't obey, you will be expelled from the group. And if the beta males overshoot in their tasks and somebody in the pack is hurt, alphas calm down by seeking body contact to the hurt ones. And another important thing is, a beta animal never ever inherits the lead wolf. Successors are selected from the pack. But a good thing is, beta animals usually stay in their position. I think politicians should understand this. In Germany, for example, Helmut Kohl selected Wolfgang Schäuble as being the next chancellor. But the Christian Democrats voted him out and he lost to Angela Merkel. Angela Merkel, she thought that Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, we call them her in Germany AKK, would become the next chancellor. She had to resign after 1.5 years. Internationally, Bill Clinton thought Al Gore would be his successor, a great successor. Al Gore lost the election in 2000 to George Bush, as we know. And in Great Britain, Tony Blair resigned in 2007 for Gordon Brown, and Gordon Brown lost the election in 2010 to David Cameron, and he lost about 92 seats. Incredible, absolutely incredible. Okay, leadership, organization. There's a wonderful example with the Herrings. Even giant swarms work perfectly synchronously. Locomotion always parallel. Foraging, small groups, and danger, they have two possibilities when they are accepted. The explosion strategy go away, or just swim around the danger. The rules of the herrings: a minimum distance to the neighbor, 1/3 of a body length. The best would be 1 body length. You always orient yourself at your neighbors, swim towards the food, swim away from danger. Consequences, the system is simple and effective. Observations and experiments show us when there are artificial fishes used, each fish can take control of the whole swarm. However, be aware of that. One crazy fish as a leader, all fishes go crazy. What does this mean to us in a company? What is a swarm in a company? Group of equal type employees with definitely clear defined tasks. No ranks. Advantages: no organizational overhead. Please focus on the task. It's always, the swarm is only as good as its rules. And what makes good rules in a company? As few rules as possible. The rules should be clear, concrete, and give guiding action, allowing room for interpretation. Rules can improve through evolution. Try it out in your company by practice. Watch and change. Let the swarm change the rules, and always keep an eye on the fulfillment of the tasks. Another teamwork group that is wonderful are dolphins. When they are hunting anchovy, for example, they talk about it. They have before social relationships in mini teams, 3 to 4 dolphins. And when they hunt, they form temporary alliances with other teams, maximum groups about 15 dolphins, and they form strategic alliances with outsiders like seagulls. So lessons learned from dolphins: stay flexible in your company with mini teams, form mini teams in a team, limit the time of your teams, give them challenging tasks, and neglect any personal discrepancies. And the thing I like the best is acknowledgement of the bees. There's the beehive, there are the suppliers, for example sunflower, and there's the environment. And the bee was outside, and the bee comes back and gives a waggle dance. The waggle dance shows the direction of the food source by the angle to the position to the sun. It shows the distance to the food source by the speed of the dance, and the yield of the food source due to frequency, how often they dance. Isn't that incredible? Lessons learned from acknowledgement by bees. Bees are able to display multidimensional information about location of the food source. They give 3-dimensional direction instruction on the vertical honeycomb surface, easy and correctly. And my conclusion and lesson learned is: successful companies need directions through clear, unambiguous communication systems and convincing leaders. So manager and management consultants can learn from Mother Nature. Strategy and the actions that are required must be easy to communicate, easy to understand by everyone, based as possible on as little data as possible, based on a common understanding and common values, and strategies should be easy to implement. So Mother Nature has quite a lot to tell us the managers. Thank you very much.
We are at the end of our first TEDxESCPLondon event. Before closing the event properly, we'd like to say a couple of thank yous, as a lot of time has been invested in making this event a reality. First of all, we'd like to thank our extraordinary speakers for taking the time and being with us today, for tackling the theme transformative change in various perspectives. Secondly, we'd also like to thank the ESCP Business School, and in particular, the Master in Digital Transformation Management and Leadership, for supporting the event and for spreading our message across and beyond the business school. And lastly, we'd also like to thank our TEDx student team for making this event happen and working relentlessly, all by having classes or sometimes even full-time internships in the meanwhile. We'd like to ask you a question for our closing. Did you learn something today? We certainly hope you did. We hope you got inspired. We hope you got fired up and maybe have new ideas or inspirations on your own. We challenge you to spread and share those ideas, to change attitudes, to change lives, and ultimately to create transformative change. As we heard in the beginning, transformative change originates from nothing more than a brave idea that turns into reality with the help of a lot of ambition. So, with this, we'd like to close our event and thank you for participating, for attending our first TEDxESCP London event.